This is Legislative Review on Prairie Public. I'm Dave Thompson. Thanks for joining us. Today, our guest is the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Republican Senator Ray Holmberg from Grand Forks. Senator, thanks for taking the time.
You're very welcome.
So this week, of course, the big news is you had your March revenue forecast. From what you saw and what you heard, how is this going to, finish the work on the budget in the weeks to come?
Well, I think it was necessary to have these final numbers, but at the same time, because the legislature, on a bipartisan manner, took a look at the revenue in January when the governor put together his budget and sent it to the printers. Oil, which is a major portion of parts of the budget, was in the $80 and $70 range. It's now in the $40 range, and that made a big difference. So the legislature and the two appropriations committee in January reduced the anticipated revenue by about $680 million coming into the general fund. So when we had this new revenue forecast the other day, it wasn't a big, huge jump because we had already anticipated less money, and we had done some reductions in some of the requests from the governor's budget. But I think we're in pretty good position to finish up the session. The House and the Senate will have to work out differences, obviously, but the jump from the original governor's forecast to today was made much less because the legislature anticipated and made changes in the budget in January.
So you had a reality check in January, and that's what helped lay the groundwork for the work that's to come.
Exactly, and that's what it was billed as. Edmund Burke said, respect reality. And in January, we respected it, and now we're just going to deal with it and finish up the session in the next 20-some days.
When you mentioned that, you did in January assume that the big trigger, so to speak, the reduction of more than half of the oil tax revenue was going to take place and was going to affect oil tax revenues coming in.
Yes, and the general fund itself, and as the governor is always quick to point out, does not depend directly on very much oil money. There are impacts, though, obviously, on the budget through sales tax and income tax, but the revenue that flows into the general fund from most of the other sources is not directly impacted, so that our general fund, after this new revenue forecast, changes some, obviously, but it doesn't change a great deal. Where the money was going to go that had been anticipated was money that flows into various funds like the Legacy Fund, a constitutional fund, Common Schools Trust Fund, a constitutional fund, Foundation Aid Stabilization, constitutional fund. But the one that makes a big impact on water projects is the Resources Trust Fund. This current biennium, we're spending about $280 million of water projects, which is directly tied to oil income. The anticipation in the original executive budget was $980 million. And the way it looks now, there's about 200 and some million.
200 and some million is what we're talking about.
Right.
So it's a substantial reduction, but there is money there for some projects.
Yes, but the appetites, because of what the budget was doing, or what the economy was doing, the appetites were whetted pretty watery, and there won't be the water projects that were anticipated in the original executive budget because the money isn't there.
Now, I assume the budget is still pending right now. What does that mean in terms of projects like the Fargo diversion, or maybe the idea of having a Red River water supply?
Well, they all will be looked at and prioritized. It's just that we won't be able to do the volume of projects, number one, and number two, the timeline for some projects might have to be extended. That we can't do it this year, we might have to put it off till another time. We will also take, I think, a strong look at the fact that there are some water projects that have money but haven't done anything for a number of years because of lawsuits or something like that, and we might have to take a look at, I shouldn't say might, we need to take a look at whether or not we should take the money back so that we can put it on a project which actually can be accomplished during the next 2 years. But that's still part of the discussion. The House hasn't finished the Water Commission budget yet, so we'll see how they react to this new reality, and then they'll send it back to the Senate for conference committee.
You know, one thing that happened during the meeting when the appropriators were briefed about the new budget forecast and some of the methodology getting to it, there was some surprise that the amount of sales tax being collected was not going to drop as much as the January forecast that the legislature put together. Did you find that surprising?
No, I think the legislators had some good discussion and some good questioning at the budget forecast meeting. The question, though, is what do we do about it? This is the budget forecast of the executive branch. Do we make changes in it? Do we say as a legislature, well, we don't think it's going to be $1 billion, it's only going to be 800 million or some number like that. And there's an old saying in politics that if you change something, you own it. And there is discussion that we will continue to use the new revenue forecast, but because of the volatility of oil and volatility of ag products too, that we give ourselves a much larger cushion than we would have if we agreed with everything with the new numbers.
The cushion you're talking about, of course, is the ending fund balance in the general fund.
Correct.
What would be a rough number? I know it's probably a little bit early.
It's a little early because we haven't run our current status, budget status, through this new revenue forecast, and that will give us decent numbers as to how much we might be behind. We're focusing really heavily on ongoing expenditures because that's what gets you in trouble down the road. A lot of the oil money, for example, was used for one-time projects, and that can be adjusted much easier. So we don't want to get ahead of what our ongoing revenue is projected to be, because then you run the risk of having budgetary problems down the road.
So it's all being prudent budgeting.
Right. And the questions and the discussions that I've been privy to and heard is there's a lot of realism in this legislature. Some are think that, well, let's spend X amount more. Others are saying, oh my goodness, we can't spend any money. There's that dichotomy between the various folks. But at the end of the day, I think the legislature comes together and is a realistic body.
Now, how is this going to affect the idea of changing the formula for oil tax distribution in terms of money going back to the counties? The governor proposed, and several Western legislators have proposed to go from the current 25% back to the county, 75% of the state, to a 60-40 split, local state. And the House went only 30-70. Mm-hmm. Where are the discussions now?
Discussions are still going on. We have not had a hearing in the Senate on the bill. That's actually going to be heard on Monday the 30th. The rationale and the reason is the folks that were proposing the bill and shepherding it through the legislature prudently wanted to wait until after the revenue forecasts, because that makes a difference, because that bill has a definite impact on the ending fund balance and on the resources available. So we're having that hearing a week from this coming Monday.
So you don't want to tip your hand about what you think it might end up?
No, I don't know what it might end up at this stage. It's still in discussion. and and working between the Senate and the House. You'll have to wait till the 30th. Then you will see.
Or sometime in April if and when there's a conference committee.
Right, right.
And that was an interesting thing. Just to tell you, I had a chance to talk to the leader, Senator Wardner, who said that he doesn't think that there will be a lot of policy conference committees this time. There will be some money conference committees, but he thinks there's going to be some general agreement between the House and Senate before the conference committee, so they may not be as tough as previous years.
Well, at times they've been extremely contentious. Sometimes it's the small issues. And by small, I mean they're all important, but as far as money issues, sometimes it's a small amount of money that causes a lot of angst and a lot of different conference committees going back and forth. But we are in constant conversation. As you recall, in January, one of the things that we recommended in the new forecast is that the employee compensation, instead of the 4 and the 4, which, by the way, was presented when oil was $91 a barrel, go to 3 and 3. And since that time, even with this new revenue forecast, I don't think there's any stomach on the part of the legislators, or a majority of legislators, to make any further changes in that. I think it will remain the 3 and the 3.
That's good to know, because that gives a heads up to all the state employees that this is what is happening. And it's not a case of any kind of ratcheting back. It's just you've been dealt a hand and you have to play with the hand you're dealt.
Correct. And I think the state employees were group-wise were accepting of what we did in January. I think that we also made some changes in market equity adjustments. There were some line items in budgets, and they certainly now will be back on the table because all that money was taken out. And if nothing else, we should at least balance that against the money that was saved that would have gone into health insurance. But the contracts were, the new contract with Sanford was $31 and some cents less per contract.
So that gives a pot of money for
There's a small amount there. I think it's about $7 million. But we do need to look at some market equity too, and we will start doing that now after this budget forecast as we start going into the budgets in the subcommittees in the Senate. We will be looking at doing some restoration of that.
It's also no secret that when the January forecast came out, some of the budgets who asked for more full-time equivalents, FTEs, for more people, some of those numbers had to be reduced. There are going to be more state employees, from what everybody says, than there were 2 years ago. But it's not to the amount that was requested by the governor.
Right.
Do you see much change in that?
There will be some adjustments. The governor in his budget really looked at health and safety as a part of a high priority. And the Attorney General's office, for example, the Health Department, Water Commission, the Judiciary, there were quite a number of new employees, but they clearly could demonstrate the need. In fact, in the budget for the Attorney General, Wayne Stenjum, there were 19 positions, I believe. A part of the new positions that the Senate approved for his office are funded by the federal government. And there's a lot of issues and a lot of problems with criminal activity in the western part of the state particularly. There is obviously health and safety issues having to do with the Health Department, with the Water Commission and getting permits done. There's been too much activity for the staff that they have. So we approved most of the FTEs that were asked for, not all of them. And we had asked the agencies to prioritize. They might be down for 3 new FTEs. And we asked them, okay, of these 3, we're going to fund one of them, which is the most important one.
Okay. I want to switch gears and talk about taxation policy because we're going back to the forecast again. The forecast numbers did not assume the income tax reductions as was proposed by the governor originally and which are going through the House and Senate right now. I've been hearing a lot of people saying maybe we shouldn't do that this time. What's your position?
Well, we've cut individual income tax by 50% in the last 3 biennia, and that's a substantial savings. I think many legislators who talk about tax reductions are focusing on property tax because that is what they're hearing. That's what I was hearing during the campaign that just concluded. It was property tax. Are we going to continue? Are we going to improve on the property tax reductions that we have? But I think that movement of those other tax issues, I believe the Senate has House bills, about 150 some million of tax reductions, and the House has a bill passed by the Senate earlier that had the governor's $125 million reduction. They are still percolating because, they had to wait. I mean, those committees had to wait until we had some numbers that we were going to say, yes, this is our revenue. So I anticipate that there will be movement on those bills in the very near future. So we'll have to see.
And the movement could be either way.
It could
really.
be either way. Yeah, I just can't tell you that. Remember what they always say, the Appropriations Committee writes the checks, but Finance and Tax has the deposit slips. Mm-hmm. So we have to see what they do too.
Exactly. So there's been talk about keeping some days at the end of the session. And in talking to leadership, they do believe that you'll be out in 75 days, giving you a 5-day cushion just in case things take a turn for the worse or maybe a turn for the better. You can come for a 5-day session. As we sit here today, and you've got budgets and some big budgets ahead of you, and maybe some conference committees, can you be done in 75 days?
I think it's possible. We have to finish our hearings. We still got a few more in Senate, and I believe the House does too. And then we just start conferring. So it's possible. I would not discount it. Part of it is not only the drive on the part of leadership to get it done, but also then the members have to buy into it, because if the members want to stay and argue over an issue or two, they actually have control because it is majority rule. And I don't mean partisan majority. If in the Senate, if 25 want to stay and fight over a bill an extra couple days, they will. So it's a challenge to leadership, but it's also a challenge to committee chairs, and it's a challenge to the members. If that is a goal, can it be achieved? Yes.
Well, you talked about some budgets you haven't heard yet. One of the biggies is higher education, and you have that starting next week.
Right. We have 3 days of higher education budget, and it'll be very interesting to see if or how they present their budget request to the Senate, because I have asked that they look at not what the executive budget has, because there's hundreds of millions of dollars less. And I told my friends in higher education, you are asking for 20% increase. Everyone else is getting 4 and 5 and 3 and 4. Good luck at selling 20%. There was consternation on the part of some of the presidents, quite vocally, after the House had finished the budget. But the way I think they view their budget is different than how the legislature views it. If an agency, and I'll just pick an agency, if an agency got $1 million last time, and this time the governor had said they get $2 million, and the legislature gives them, $1.5 million, they call that a cut. And it's not a cut. When you look at the campuses, some who have made the most noise about being unhappy with what the House did, and what the House did is not perfect, it needs work. The campuses range from 6% increase in general fund money to 9% increase in the amount of money they have. But how some in higher education view it is, because that is driven by a formula, they don't want to consider that 6% or 9% as being an increase. That's our money. We get that. Now give us money for costs to continue, for salaries, et cetera, et cetera. They don't want to count the 6 to 9% as an increase, but the legislature counts it as an increase. And I think the average person would count it as an increase.
Do you think that's where it's going to stay, about that 6 to 9%, or is there potentially some wiggle room?
Oh, there's wiggle room. There definitely is wiggle room. There's a few things the House did when they did some fine-tuning on the formula that really need to be looked at. But I think some of the folks in higher ed are very unhappy about some of the structural changes that were made. For example, the lawyers going to the Attorney General's office, which happens in other jurisdictions, or the auditors essentially not reporting directly to the people that they're auditing, but report to the board, the appointed Board of Higher Education, the policy people. And there's some bugs to work out there to make sure that that the transition is good. There are some very good things in that higher ed budget. A commitment to try to help in the cost. I believe the Senate is going to take a look at what the House did and focus even more on needs-based versus the merit-based. Merit-based scholarships. We have a pretty healthy merit-based scholarship program and a decent needs-based. But research indicates that if you want to impact people going to college, you focus on the needs-based because they're the ones who won't go. Many of the merit-based were going to go to college anyway. They're the ones that got a 33 on the ACT and had 4.0s. They're going to go to college anyway. But I don't think I don't believe the Senate will roll back the merit scholarship dollars that are there now. I think, though, what we will do is take additional money and put it into the needs-based for the students who really need it. That's why it's called need-based, I guess.
So that's the affordability piece.
That's part of the affordability piece. We have to look at tuition. I believe the Senate Education Committee has put a do not pass on a bill that would have the legislature set tuition rates. And they asked me how I was going to vote, and I said I'm probably going to vote no, because I would rather have us, when we wade into that area, that we cap the amount of tuition. Because if you recall, 2011, the legislature left town thinking that the campuses were going to get a 2-point-something% increase, and within a month or so, one of the campuses in one of the largest cities in the state had an 8.8% increase through the board action, and that caught a lot of people off guard, I'll put it that way.
In the few minutes we have left, I have to ask about the bricks and mortar question, because not only higher education, which had a number of buildings that it proposed, but there were other buildings like the Liberty Memorial at the Capitol for the Supreme Court and some others. Most of those building projects are out of the budget right now, but they're still hanging around.
Yes.
You tell me where you think that might go.
Well, I think that there are projects that were taken out of the budget, for example, in higher education that are locally funded or funded through revenue bonds, which means you build it and then the people who use the building pay for it. I think that there will be a big move to put them back in. I think that a new governor's residence will be looked at because the money will be there. and it's constitutionally for construction on the Capitol grounds. I think we'll take another look at the financial center out at the Bank of North Dakota, although I'd be very surprised if we do anything with the Supreme Court this session. You know, there was $40 million in the budget. The chief, who's just a great guy, said, you know, give me 4 Corinthian columns and I'll go anywhere. But I don't think we're going to delve into that 40 million. The other ones, it's still up in the air. You know, there is some that are advocating bonding. I think it's way too early to consider bonding as an option. Although the state we could bond $350 to $400 million because of the way the law is. It's a certain percent of the sales tax that goes, and we haven't bonded for a few sessions. But I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying it's going to be part of the discussion.
Well, thank you. We've run out of time, and there will
Already.
be a lot to talk about, but thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Our guest today on the program, State Senator Ray Holmberg from Grand Forks. He's a Republican and chairman of Senate Appropriations Committee. For Prairie Public, I'm Dave Thompson.